Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
I was thinking about what it's like going into a store today, and one of the associates asking, "May I help you?" Yeah, fat chance, right? Because they have no idea why they're there, let alone what they're selling. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. We're delighted you're with us in class today. We broadcast Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time. And those are the hours that we're here in the studio, and we can take your calls. So if you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. And we have a telephone listen line, and it's working. Thank you, Zeno Radio Network. And that listen line is 605-477-3249, 605-477-3249. Guineith Isaacs is with us. Blake is engineering. I'm Vin Finelli. Welcome, Guineith Isaacs.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
I'm doing well. So are you in the dark?
Yes. Unfortunately, yes, we are in the dark. Although I've got my wood-fired cook stove lit, and so it's sort of like the rosy glow of firelight.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you're working on your battery bank, your nickel iron batteries. Yeah. You know, Guineith, I did a quick calculation. Our battery bank has 40 cells, and this relates to the cost of water. So I did a quick estimation. Now, I'm not sure that this is 100% accurate, but it's probably pretty close. I believe each one of our cells holds 8 quarts of water mixed with a chemical powder called KOH, potassium hydroxide. And so distilled water, 8 quarts times 40 cells is 320 quarts of water. Divide that by 4 to get gallons. You get 80 gallons of water. So our battery bank uses 80 gallons of water. Now, how much is water in your neck of the woods?
Well, it depends on whether you go to the small town country hardware store or the big box store or the supermarket in the city. The supermarket in the city, I did actually manage to get some water for $3.50 for 5 litres. Okay, 5 litres being approximately the same as 5 quarts. So that's $7 for 2.5 gallons.
Wow.
So that's not too bad. That works out. But, oh my gosh, in the country town, they want to charge an arm and a leg. It's about $10 or $12 a gallon.
Guineith, I just did the
arithmetic for demineralized water.
I just did the arithmetic. Now, if you were to haul this back, if you had a truck that could, haul this back, this 80 gallons of water, you're looking at $224 for 80 gallons of water.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
how do they justify that?
The thing is, I decided to actually buy the demineralized water because I did some calculations, just some mental arithmetic of the time that it would take and the trouble that it would take to actually distill the water. It takes energy and it takes fuel to produce distilled water. And although I have the equipment here to be able to do it, it's quite a piece of kit to set up. And for it to, I have a laboratory still. And so to operate a laboratory still, you have to have a tank that's up high, and you have to have a collection tank below. And you actually have two sets of water. You have the water that you're purifying and the water that you're using as a coolant. And you have to keep the two lots of water separate. And so you have a pot boiling, and you put a funnel attached to some sort of a pipe, rubber pipe or whatever, which is attached to the still. And then you have a set of cooling water, which doesn't have to be particularly pure because it's not meant to mix with the water that you're trying to purify. But you have it in a tank above, and then you have that running in a coil around the condenser. And what that does is it removes the heat from the steam that is passing through the condenser, and it makes the steam cooler, and so it turns it back into a liquid, a very, very pure liquid, which is distilled water. And any minerals or any impurities will remain in the cooking pot, theoretically, and theoretically at the end of the process what you get is very, very pure water, unless you've got volatile oils in the water as well, in which case what you're going to get is volatile oils dripping out first. And that's, or some other substance like alcohol. Unless you've got something like that in the water, what you're going to get is very, very pure distilled water. Okay, that's in a nutshell. That's the 5-minute thing of how a still works. And I could make up a bigger still. And around here, one of the industries that operates around here is eucalyptus oil production. And you've certainly got some very, very big stills that operate in the middle of the forest, but nevertheless, it's a big day to go out and operate a still. And I've decided that it's just easier to go and buy some in the shop, and you've got to make these decisions. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Absolutely, it does. And class, what we're talking about is Guineith has to replace the electrolyte, the solution, in her battery bank. And she's purchased the potassium hydroxide crystals in the sufficient quantity to do that. And then she has to very carefully mix this electrolyte, which requires, and we can talk about some of what it requires and the safety precautions that are necessary and the equipment that are necessary to do this. But she has to flush out her cells. Now, a battery is a collection of cells. So, for example, back when we had flashlights that had D cells, those dry cells, they were individual cells. A collection of cells would be like a 9-volt battery, which had about 6 separate cells all in the same package, and it was called a 9-volt battery. And that's the correct nomenclature. 9-volt battery, D cell, or dry cell, because it was just a single cell. Well, the collection of cells forms the battery for Guineith's off-grid system. And after almost 20 years of service, the electrolyte...
Over 20 years. This is its 21st year.
The electrolyte becomes contaminated with oxygen. And so what you do is to renew those cells, you just pour out the electrolyte, and then you flush them out with distilled water, the cells. And then what you do is you add the new electrolyte, which is potassium hydroxide and water, distilled water. Now, the reason I'm mentioning distilled water, class, when you want to put water in a battery or a cell of a battery, like for your car or truck battery, that 12-volt, as they're called, batteries, you need to use distilled water. And you can get that at the Chinese factory outlet. And it keeps for a very long time if you keep it out of the sun, because you don't want it to grow anything like algae in the water. I'm not sure it could grow algae because there's nothing in the water but pure water, but it might through a small amount of contamination. So if you keep the distilled water out of the sunlight and you keep it, cool, it should last years and years. And so when you want to top off a battery or a cell of a battery, use distilled water. Okay? Make sure you wear eye protection. Make sure you wear gloves. Make sure you don't get it on you. And if you do have water immediately available to wash off any acid that has gotten onto you immediately. So what we do, whenever we do it, we have a garden hose ready. I mean, we're very close to it. The hose is primed, ready to go. And if we ever get acid on us, we immediately flush it off. And then we wash our hands very carefully. So you can neutralize an acid with a base. What would that be? Like baking soda. So you could have some baking soda in a small container and water mixed together. You don't need to have distilled water for, neutralizing an acid spill. But you can use just regular tap water. But be prepared for a spill just in case, because it happens. And make sure you wear eye protection. Guineith, you want to talk about safety precautions that you're going to be going through?
Yeah. It's really important to note that with a nickel-iron battery, it's not acid, it's actually alkali. And the alkali is potassium hydroxide. And with potassium hydroxide, you should absolutely not neutralize it with an acid, because it's an exothermic reaction. That means it generates heat, and it will make the burn worse.
Yeah.
Okay? So
like what
in the case of a potassium hydroxide burn, you should just rinse it with clean water.
Yeah.
And absolutely. We'll talk about this some more in the next segment.
Right. Guineith Isaac's live in Australia. Guineith Isaac is with us, and we're talking about potassium hydroxide, and we're talking about renewing nickel-iron batteries. And class, when I mentioned batteries previously, I was talking about lead-acid batteries, for your car or your truck. And if you get that has an electrolyte that's an acid, and you would neutralize an acid with a base, like baking soda and water. Nickel-iron cells are different. They use a base as an electrolyte, the opposite of an acid. So you need to be really careful that you know what you're doing. Okay, so Guineith, back to you.
Okay, when you normally buy the potassium hydroxide from a chemical company, it comes in the form of a dry, white, flaky powder in a sack, which looks something like a chicken food sack. But the thing is that you've got to remember it's not chicken food. It is actually a highly reactive compound. You have to keep it dry. You have to store it away from other chemicals, especially things like, acids, even things like vinegar can react with it and create a strongly exothermic reaction. And depending on the chemical, it could even explode. So you have to keep it somewhere warm, but not hot, obviously, and dry, and preferably off the ground so it doesn't get any moisture forming underneath it. If you have a dog wander past, it doesn't, lift its leg against it or whatever. These are sort of practical considerations. Like we have dogs and they just, mostly go wherever they want. But yeah, you've got to take account of this and you've got to look after it properly. It's fine. It's perfectly safe and perfectly stable. as long as you look after it properly. But when you're mixing it, it's very important to remember that even when you're mixing it with water, it is still a strongly exothermic reaction. And so another thing that I bought actually last week, because I've been getting the kit together, not only the hydroxide, but also the kit for, mixing it together. I've had to get it over a couple of weeks. And one of the things that I got was a 20-litre plastic bottle, which is a drinking water quality bottle. That means that it's not going to have any contaminants from the plastic. Okay, so it's not going to have anything like bisphenol A or anything like that in the outgassing from the water bottle. You get my cells actually have a liquid volume of about 10 litres of water. Okay, so they look, in appearance, my cells look like big truck batteries. Okay, so they're not tall and thin like your batteries are, Vincent. They're much more squat and they're much more rectangular shaped. So whereas that they would probably have about, whereas yours would probably have the anode and the cathode longer and thinner, mine are smaller and squatter, but there's more of them. Does that make sense?
Oh, surely it does. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it has more of the appearance of a regular truck battery, but probably the anode and the cathode has a similar surface area, I would say. It probably has a volume of around about 10 litres, and I ascertained that by about probably a month ago. I realised that the batteries were frighteningly low. And this was what triggered this sort of episode. Although even if nickel-ion batteries are very low, normally if you top them up, they come back quite quickly. But these ones...
Guineith Isaacs is with us, and we're talking about the maintenance of nickel-iron batteries or cells. And it's kind of daunting. Fortunately, it only happens every 10 or 20 years or so. But please continue, Guineith.
Okay, I'm not quite sure where we were up to, because I sort of stopped talking and found I was in the middle of an ad.
Yeah.
I didn't even hear the music. But anyway, I'll keep going. When you have a 20-litre plastic drinking water bottle with a tap at the bottom, okay? I'm going to assume that you've already flushed out your cell, okay? And that it's nice and clean and ready to go. You get the 20-litre bottle. You put 9 litres of water in the bottle. You have the bottle standing in a water bath, okay? Now, the water bath will help to draw some of the heat away from the, away from the water bottle. And also, if you spill any, it's only going to go into the surrounding water bath, so it can help to, deal with spills as well. Although you shouldn't spill any, you should be more careful than that. And if you can't spoon out a powder without spilling it, you need to question whether you should be doing this, because you need to be able to be very accurate. What you do is you get the 9 litres of water, and to that 9 litres of water, you very, very slowly just sprinkle in the KOH flake, okay? and it's going to probably, I'm anticipating fizzing, popping, boiling sort of reaction when this powder hits the water surface, and then it should dissolve almost immediately. That's what I'm anticipating happening. I don't think I will have to actually stir it. Okay, I think that it should dissolve readily enough without me even having to touch the water. And because when you get this sort of highly exothermic reaction, it means it doesn't need any encouragement. It's generating its own heat. If you add, because you have to that 9 litres of water, you have to add 2.1 kilograms of KOH, which is quite a bit. You're going to be there sprinkling for quite a little while. It might take you 15 minutes, 20 minutes or more to slowly enough, add the KOH so that you don't boil the water, because you do not want to boil that water. If you feel that it's getting hot, you need to go away and do something else for a while and wait for it to naturally cool, and then come back and add some more. So how you avoid that is you stand it in a water bath, and you stand your water bottle in a water bath, and you very, very gradually add it to the top. Okay? That's how you do it. And at the end of this process, once you've added the 2.1 kilograms of KOH to the 9 litres of water, distilled water, you should have 10 litres of electrolyte. Okay. Now, the reason why that extra litre comes, obviously, is displacement. Okay. And it should have a specific gravity. Okay. By specific gravity, we mean, hang on, 1.2 kilos. 1.2 kilos of KOH. Very sorry, very important scrub. That's not 2.1 kilos. It's 1.2 kilos, because the specific gravity of the liquid should be 1.2. Okay? And you've got to realize that water has a mass of 1 kilogram per litre, okay, or approximately 1 kilogram per quart. And anything, so water has a specific gravity on its own, pure water of 1. Anything extra that you add into that is going to add to the gravity of the water, because you're adding mass to the water. I hope I'm not flying over anyone's head here.
No, I think this is a great refresher for chemistry.
Many moons ago, I trained as a scientist. So I sort of slipped back into this mode of thought almost immediately. So, yeah, but I think
this is a very good refresher of chemistry.
Yep. What was that, sorry?
Yeah, it's a great refresher for chemistry.
Yeah. But like I say, this is something you've got to realize. Now, the other reason why you have a potable water bottle is they have a tap on the bottom, okay? And what you do is you can hook up a piece of very clean, 12 millimeter pipe, very, very clean, any sort of drinking water quality pipe, okay? Any pipe that you would be able to send drinking water through. So something like a pipe that you would use, for doing irrigation to garden plants. You get this 12 millimeter pipe from the big box hardware store, and you can put some of this 12 millimeter pipe onto the end of the tap and use that, sit it up on a table, and basically put the end of the pipe into the top of the battery. And that's going to be a very low-risk way to get the KOH into the battery, into the cell, rather. See, I even slip up from time to time. Just, English, we mess these things up, but you've got to be accurate. Or the PVC clear pipe, okay? Or even if you had some garden hose, because, you could possibly use that at a stretch, okay? But you want something
Gwyneth, here's what I do.
Rubber-based, yep.
Here's what I use.
Or latex or silicone.
I bought some.
Pipe.
I went to one of those big. I went to a big box store, and I bought some refrigerator ice maker water line. It's kind of a
that would be
not
ideal.
so flexible. Yeah, that's what I used, and I have one of those clear water dispensers that you would put in a refrigerator. It holds a couple gallons, and it has a spigot on it. And I made an adapter with a piece of hose, another larger hose, to go inside that spigot. And I have maybe a 10 or 12 foot piece of this refrigerator tubing. Probably ours is small, maybe a quarter of an inch, so it takes a long time to top off a cell. And I put this container, the dispenser for ice water in the refrigerator, or cool water in the refrigerator, that type of a clear dispenser. You can get one of those at the Chinese factory outlet, about maybe $7. And I fill it up, and I put it on top of a ladder. And the ladder is higher than the cells. And we use two people. So one person operates the spigot, and the other person has goggles, gloves. We ventilate the area that this is in, a lot of ventilation. And one person has a light, so we can see the water level or the electrolyte level in the cells. And to do that, it was really difficult to be able to see the liquid level in the cells, because you want to illuminate the cells from behind where you're looking. So if you're looking at, let's say, the north end of the cell, you want to illuminate it from the south end. So the light travels through the cell so you can see the electrolyte level. And there's a minimum and a maximum mark imprinted on the side of this translucent cell. And our cells are kind of a milk,
unlike truck batteries,
milk bottle.
These cells are translucent.
Right.
These cells are translucent,
and so,
not like truck battery cells.
But at a difficult time seeing the water level. We'd use an LED flashlight, we'd use a trouble light, and what I ended up doing was taking a strip of LED lights, 12-volt LED lights, and I cemented them to a plastic strip that would surround them on all sides except for one. So I have a 2-foot-long strip that's powered by 12 volts, and it lights, and I can put this strip behind the cells, and it illuminates maybe 3 cells at a time, and I can put that in position, and then we can see the liquid level through the translucent battery or cell case.
Idea.
So, and it worked great. It really did. As a matter of fact, what I really did, to be more specific, I have an LED bar that has, maybe 30 little LEDs in it. And they're kind of a warm white. And I put that inside a piece of end cap trim for wallboard. So if you have a piece of wallboard or sheetrock that you don't want to flake off, and you trim it with this piece of plastic edging, I use that. And it fit perfectly, and it worked really, really well. So I have maybe a 10-foot speaker cable, and I put a piece of heat shrink on it, red, and another piece, black, to indicate the positive and negative terminals that I'm going to connect to a battery later on, a 12-volt battery, to light up this LED bar that I use for filling the cells, which seems to be about every month or so, maybe between 1 and 2 months. So, class, you might want to fabricate something like this if you use a lot of distilled water and top off your batteries or cells. We'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us, getting a little technical today. We're talking about Nickel iron batteries, and here's why this is important, class. It took almost an hour to discuss how complicated it is just to make electrolyte and just to fabricate the apparatus necessary to refill your cells. Now, I believe this is something that is not discussed with customers. Now, I may be wrong. Maybe if you're buying an off-grid system, your salesperson is going to say, "Okay, I just want you to know that when it comes time to change out the electrolyte, you're looking at a pretty complex process, and we don't know anybody who's ever done it." Does that sound about right, Guineith?
I think so. Yep. But I didn't buy my solar power system off the shelf. I bought it off somebody who was, funnily enough, going back on the grid. But they were going on-grid solar. Because at that time the government was offering a seemingly attractive rebate program, but once they got a sufficient number of people into the program, they cut off the incentives. And so a bunch of people found that they had massive solar power systems that were still costing them money because the promised check from the electrical companies never eventuated because the government cut off the funding. But anyway, that's not my problem. But if you have a government agency in your area offering massive rebates and incentives for installing a grid-connected solar power system, that might be something that you want to bear in mind. That what the government giveth, the government can also take away.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, getting back to the potassium hydroxide. It's once it's made, once it's in the battery, it's just a matter of, once you've got this rig made up, it's just a matter of turning the tap on and putting the hose in the cell, turning the tap on and filling up the cell, which is nice and handy. But we need to take a step back here because you have to empty and flush the cell before you can refill it. And I was thinking, oh gosh, how am I going to do that? And I figured out a way to do it, Vincent, and I haven't been able to tell you this, but I was quite excited because the penny dropped when I was in the big box store today, and I'll tell you how I'm going to do it. Do you know what a folding camp kitchen is?
Are you talking about a dual burner camp stove that folds? It's in like a little suitcase, and you just unfold it, and it has wings and a backdrop, and a gas supply, either propane
like that, but without the stove.
Right.
Mm-hmm. This particular one that I have, it has a bench space, it has a sink, it has racks, it has places for hanging stuff, and I suppose it's got a place where you could put a stove, but it doesn't have a stove on it. But that's not important for me because at the moment it's sitting in my kitchen and I'm looking at it and it's sitting next to my wood-fired oven. Okay? Mm-hmm. But what I can do is I can clear that off, I can take it outside, and it has a sink. And it has a sink with a drain. I can put a pipe on the drain hole of the sink and have the pipe going into another. This one is a wide-mouth, 30-litre potable water drinking bottle with a tap at the bottom. And I can use that sink to flush out the battery. But to flush out the cell. Yeah. I can use that sink to flush the cell. And that's going to make my life a whole lot easier.
When we come back from this top of the hour break, let's talk about how much do you think these cells weigh, each one? And are you able to pick one up by yourself, or do you need help? And then the ultimate question is, let's say you were to call somebody and say, you know what, I think I need some help. I need my electrolyte changed in my solar battery bank. How much y'all charge to do that? I'd love to hear what your response to that is. I'll bet it's huge. Guineith Isaacson, I'll be right back. Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Guineith Isaacson is with us. Guineith lives off-grid in Australia. And we here have an off-grid system as well in Missouri, United States of America. And I believe that this is the only broadcast that has both ends off-grid. And we're talking about what it's like. And and this is a class. I went out to look at our battery bank. And I was unhappy with all the designs that I saw on the internet. Nothing made sense to me. So I built our own. Now, it took me several days just to construct it, just to construct the rack. Then it took a couple days to get the batteries the way I wanted, and they weren't right. So we changed them. And it's kind of daunting, because what happens is you want this battery bank so that it's so darn heavy. Ours weighs about 4,400 pounds. It's so darn heavy that you want to get it right the first time so that it's not so difficult to maintain, because you're going to use this for the rest of your life where it is. But yet, every 10 or 20 years, you're going to have to take it apart and clean out the cells. So you're going to want to make it so it's safe. You want to vent it properly. You may put the cells in your garage, and you may want to keep your dogs and cats in the garage in the wintertime. And then, what about the off-gassing? What about spills? So I was unhappy with everything I saw. So I made our own. And I know how difficult and how heavy this is to manage. And I guess what I'll do, Guineith, is I think I'm going to take some pictures of our system so that our class can see what we've engineered here. I like to be private, but then again, I think that there's so many poor quality designs out there that maybe our class can do a much, much better job if they do it themselves. If you learn how to weld a little bit or bend sheet metal, you can do a much better job than anything that's available, in my opinion, commercially. So my question for you, Guineith, is would you be able to lift by yourself one of those cells, to take it out of where it currently is in the battery bank, which is a collection of these cells, and each one of them is the size of a truck battery, not a car battery, not a light truck battery, but a tractor trailer size battery. Can you handle this by yourself safely?
Just. Each cell weighs about approximately 30 kilograms.
Okay.
So just. And there's 20 of them. So all in all, this battery weighs around about half a ton, just over half a ton. Mm-hmm. Okay. There's no way that I could possibly lift it all on my own. But, I have a movie that I watch from time to time, which is about Seabiscuit, and one of the lines in that movie is brick by brick. And that's apparently a quote from the famous jockey Red Pollard. And brick by brick, my citizens, brick by brick. Well, this is cell by cell. I can lift a 30 kilogram cell. Okay, I'm in my early 40s, but because I live off the grid, because I do so much heavy physical work, I'm very fit, very healthy, and very strong. If somebody was, not so fit, not so healthy, not so strong, they would have to question whether they could lift 30 kilograms of weight. And the other thing is how this battery setup was set up by the people who built this house. They knew what they were doing. They put the battery shed on the southwest-facing side of the house. Okay, separated from the house, they built a special little mud brick shed just for the batteries, which I think is a really, really good idea. It's got excellent ventilation. It's got a shelf at the back where the inverter transformer sits, and where because it's an old transformer, it has a separate charge controller and a separate transformer, which is very, very handy, because if anything goes wrong with the charge controller, you don't have to throw out your transformer, you just get a new charge controller. And charge controllers tend to have more problems than transformers, in my experience. And how it's set up is the battery sits on rubber mats on a concrete slab. Okay, so we don't have any problems. By rubber mats, I mean rubber conveyor belt. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. You're talking about like maybe a quarter of an inch thick. It's got plies of nylon threads or polyester threads to keep it from stretching. Yeah.
And vulcanized rubber matted together. Yeah. And the reason why it sits on those is to stop the battery from discharging out through the concrete slab.
Mm-hmm. And the reason it does that,
can be a problem.
The reason it does that, class, is the concrete will absorb the heat from the cell and cool the cell, which will cause the cell to not work as well as when the cell is maybe 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So there was this old story about garage mechanics, and they would never put a car or truck battery, the kind that our class is familiar with, the lead-acid batteries. They'd never put them on a concrete floor because they would discharge. And the reason is because the heat from the battery would get absorbed by the concrete in the wintertime. So that's why they do that. But that's a good point. And that's what we did, slightly differently. But we built a raised platform shelf. We used industrial shelving material that the big box stores would use in their lumber yards. And we have these beams that will hold probably, 10,000 pounds. And we built a floor for it, and it's actually 3 tiers. Well, three rows of cells. And we can see the electrolyte in each one of the levels. And then underneath the cells, we built a pan out of metal that will catch for a short time any spills. So if there is a spill, if there is a leak, it will be contained in this pan underneath all the cells, and we could neutralize that and drain off the neutralized liquid if there is a failure of one of the cells. And I have not seen any designs commercially that have that feature. So we were concerned about that. And I'm working on a venting system because I'm not happy with any of the systems that I've seen. I came up with an idea that I think is pretty good, and I guess I should take some pictures of it when I build it. But I have all the materials to build it. I'm going to vent it outside, and it should work really, really effectively without fans and without a box around it. And I have all the materials. So I'll take some pictures when I get that done. But the bottom line is, I don't think, Guineith, that you could get on the phone and call somebody and say, hey, so y'all clean these.
Nobody would know what to do.
Clean these cells. And what do you charge? Guineith, do you have
the only one you could possibly get to help would be a friendly neighbour that you would have to, who is also living off grid, who you would have to explain everything to. It wouldn't be somebody that you would be paying. It would be somebody that you would be educating. Because you would certainly know more than they would about your system. you know, and I had a friend who lives locally help me out with some transport to go and get the KOH, and I had to explain, well, yes, it's electrolyte for a battery, but it's not acid. And that kind of, I think it might have spun this particular person out a little bit, that you could have a battery electrolyte that was not acidic.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because that's not what most people think. It's not what I thought before I looked into it and researched it. I thought, oh, okay, and actually studied what a nickel-ion battery is. Because I had, before I came across these batteries, I'd heard of Iron Edison batteries. The company, mostly through your show, Vincent. But, you know, initially I didn't even, until I looked at my own batteries, I didn't even comprehend that that's what my batteries were, because they were just batteries that came with the system. You know, they were just the cells that came with the system, and I assembled them like I would assemble any other electrical battery. Yeah.
I believe at this point that the nickel-iron off-grid battery bank is the best solution for the long run. I still believe that. I'm having some problems with one of the cells. It's lazy. It doesn't want to work right. I'm having trouble getting the manufacturer in China to say, hey, Mr. Finelli, would it be okay if we just send you one? They're really dragging their feet on doing that. So I'm going to make a YouTube video of our battery bank. I'm going to do one of two things. I'm going to say, here's the problem I had, and here's what they did about it to fix it. Thank you very much. Or, here's the problem I had. Don't get involved with these guys because they're going to leave you hanging. And do one of those two things on YouTube. We'll be right back. You know, class, one of the things that we're learning here today is just because you want to do it doesn't mean you can do it. Okay? And here's an example of what I'm talking about. Right now, they're grading our road. We live on a dirt road. It's about 5 miles long. They've got this big road grader, and they've torn up the entire road. We can't get out of the farm. So just because we want to leave the farm, let's say we need to get some supplies that are urgent. Let's say we have an urgent medical condition. We're not leaving our farm because unless we have a helicopter or an airplane, we can't get out of here. Well, we can on a motorcycle, dirt bike, yeah. But they've torn up the road. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is you may be on your own, as Guineith is. Guineith is on her own. She lives off-grid, and she is going to replace the electrolyte in her off-grid battery bank, nickel-iron cells. And so she had to do the research and learn about potassium hydroxide and the concentration and the specific gravity and the kind of water, the distilled water, and how to flush them out. And she had to figure out how to take them apart physically, how to flush them, what kind of apparatus she needed. From the beginning to the end, she has to figure this all out. Now, is there somebody you can call? And I suggest that there's hardly anybody that you can call. Pick up the phone and say, hey, it's battery bank's not working so well. It's nickel iron. Y'all do that, right? Y'all fix them? I don't think there's anybody that does that. Now, Guineith, if you had to hire somebody, I'm not talking about, paying your neighbor to be lifting the other end of it with you, for example. I'm talking about somebody that would do this from beginning to end, someone who knew how to mix the potassium hydroxide with the distilled water, flush it, do the entire job from end to end. How long do you think it would take, and how much money do you think it would cost? Because I'll bet what you're going to come up with is staggering. Okay.
Now, I'm estimating that for each cell, that I need to, flush out, it's at least going to be a couple of hours work, okay? I'm saying about 2 or 3 hours work per cell. And what I've decided I'm going to do, I just went down to my shed, the battery shed, when I came home from the big box store this afternoon after getting the distilled water and some other supplies. And I'm going to start out by taking the two batteries that are in the worst shape and flushing and replacing the electrolyte in them first and seeing how we go. And, you know, I think because I noticed that there were a couple of cells that had considerably lower voltage than the others. Okay? About a week or 10 days ago, I actually reconfigured the wiring on the battery to change it from a 24-volt battery to a 12-volt battery. And now each of these 20 cells is holding a charge of around about 1.27 volts. Okay? And I think that the reason why we've had the voltage drop, because it's been stable, is because I've reconfigured the cells into 12-volt format. Okay? And there's a certain way that you do that, and I had to go and, revise my knowledge of batteries. This is how a 12-volt cell is conducted. This is how 24-volt cell is conducted. And although it's basically, we would think of it as being discharged, actually it still holds a lot of current. A battery that size still holds a lot of current. And it is still capable of giving you quite a mule kick if you get it wrong. You do not want to get it wrong.
Absolutely.
And that's something you have to remember with any battery of this size. Even if you think it's discharged, it's never really discharged. It can still give quite a mule kick.
So Guineith, according to my simple arithmetic, 24 cells, 3 hours per cell.
20 cells.
I think 24.
Except for a couple of them.
Okay.
Holding about 1.2.
Okay. So that's 60 hours just to flush them. That doesn't include making the electrolyte. We'll be right back. So Guineith, I was doing some arithmetic on my notepad here, and I was thinking, okay, just to flush the cells, 3 hours apiece, 20 cells, 60 hours. If you could find somebody to do it for $20 an hour, that's $1,200. But one person can't do it. It really takes two people, so that'd be $40 an hour, $20 a piece. That's if you can find somebody, who really is not expert in this. We're not talking about an engineer or a scientist. We're talking about someone who hardly knows how to do it. You're looking at $2,400 just to change the electrolyte. That's without the cost of the electrolyte. Does that sound reasonable, that arithmetic?
Well, that's probably about what it would cost. But you see, the thing is that I'm not getting paid for this work, and actually if you wanted to get a scientist or an engineer to do it, you would be at least charging, they would at least be charging $100 an hour, at least, minimum.
Okay, and I agree with that. I agree with that number. So then you're talking about $6,000 in labor to change out the electrolyte, plus the cost of the electrolyte, plus whatever the disposal fee is for the electrolyte, right? So we're probably...
And that's why...
How much do you think... Yes.
You would be looking at a cost of about $7,000 or $8,000 for rejuvenating a 20-year-old nickel-iron battery, which is why on the maintenance schedule of the telco, they wrote them off after 8 years. Because my battery, I think I've mentioned this before, it's a retired telephone company battery that was designed to power something like a remote telephone exchange or a cell phone tower. And so it would be fully capable of doing that. But for the telco, for the telephone company to actually pay an engineer or a scientist to go and rejuvenate the battery, your one is more or less the same as my one, right? Your battery is about the same as my one, and it cost you $5,000. And it
costs more than that. I think
$7 or $8 to rejuvenate it.
I believe we have around a little over 8,000 in our battery bank. But I just looked up the price of them. I just found a similar battery bank. This is without cables, this is just the batteries or the cells. Okay, 48 volt system, 500 ampere hours, $29,000. These numbers are crazy, class. Absolutely crazy. Now that's what I was thinking. Boy, I ought to call these guys and have them on the air. No, I can't do that. Not at $29,000 for a 500 ampere hour battery bank at 48 volts. So, and that's without the rack. That's without the tray to contain it. That's without the cables. That's without the inverter. Heavy duty cables. Yeah, and we're talking about the cables that we used are multi-strand copper, and they are like the diameter of a quarter. They're really heavy. And so when you buy these cables,
40 amp.
You look at them
cable.
by the inch. How many inches can I shrink this down to? Because we got the cables at a very low price, about between $200 and $300 just for the cables to connect the battery bank to the inverter. That's it, $200 to $300. The connectors, just the little ends that you put on, are like $10 a piece. And then if you want them crimped on, that's extra. Yeah, it's a pretty daunting.
Deal.
Yeah, it is a big deal. It really is a big deal. And we're talking about this $29,000 is just for the battery bank, nickel iron. That's without the solar panels. That's without the solar mounting system. That's without the labor to put the solar panels on the mount. That's without the concrete. I mean, if you want to do one of these things, it can be done. And I know a lot of the secrets to do it, and I'll be glad to share them with our class. I learned the hard way. But it's a daunting task. But it's a task to freedom. Because I can get our electric bill to 0. But I will have to change the electrolyte at some point. And I want to minimize that, so you can reduce the wear on your batteries by how hard you charge them. You charge them a little easier, you discharge them a little easier, and they'll last longer. So this is a great discussion, because I have a feeling that most people who are thinking they get a solar system, they just call a guy, they have it installed, and they're good to go until something goes wrong. Yeah. And I believe that many of the installers really don't know. And I would not have an installer install a system for me that hasn't had several years of experience with the system in his own or her own property.
Living with these sorts of off-grid systems.
That's what I mean.
You've got to live with them to understand them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely have to live with them. And you'll learn that, there is a price to pay to turn that electric switch on at night. The price is you might not have it when you need it later on that night. Or if you want to make toast at night with a toaster, running the toaster would be the equivalent of running...
You can't run a washing machine at 10 p.m.
Correct.
You just can't. Yep.
Yeah. And Guineith, that's a really good point. I'm glad you mentioned that. So Mrs. Finelli will say, it's really sunny out. I'm going to be doing the laundry in about an hour, because we'll have more sunlight in an hour, at, let's say, 11 o'clock in the morning than we have at 10 o'clock in the morning. She'll look at the meters. She'll say, okay, we're charging the batteries. That's great. You'll have enough energy to run your broadcast. That's great. I won't be doing laundry or using any devices that consume a lot of current until the battery bank is, has a greater charge in it, to make sure that we don't knock you off the air because I'm doing the laundry.
Yeah, and this is how you've got to think. And if the pressure tower gets a bit empty, and I don't notice it because I'm busy doing other things, and I turn the tap on, and it's just the water's just trickling out, I go, oh, darn, I better fill up that pressure tower tomorrow morning. We're just, at about 11 a.m. or midday,
Yeah,
because
when the sun
water
is,
pump's
when the sun's
electric.
out.
When
the sun is out.
Yeah, when the sun is out. Then you can turn on the water pump.
Yeah, and so what we're talking about is you may not be able to do the kinds of things that you want to do when you want to do them. We take for granted when we're connected to the grid that the electricity's there. It's just there, and you just turn on your devices and without concern as to the electricity and where it comes from. But when you're making your own electricity, you become painfully aware of how much you have and what it takes to get it. And I'll tell you what, you would find that you would be a little disappointed if you had friends come over who were frivolous with your electricity on a cloudy day.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Like if you had, like if you had a well and you wanted to pump water and they want to take a shower, when there's no sun. Yeah. Those are just simple things that you put into perspective and you put into the plan as to how you live. And this will change your life. Unless you want to throw more money at it. Now, if you want to spend maybe $200,000 on a battery bank, and you want to spend $200,000 on solar panels, and you want to spend, maybe $80,000 on an inverter, well, maybe you can do what you want when you want. But if you want to do it frugally, you're going to have to alter your lifestyle in order to live with a limited, rare resource.
Yep. And the other thing is you have to realize if you're going to spend $200,000 on batteries, $200,000 on inverters and charge controllers, and $80,000 on solar panels in order to run your 10 kilowatt air conditioner, that's almost $500,000. Or it is $500,000 together with the cost of a 10 kilowatt air conditioner. That's $500,000. Do you have a spare $500,000 lying around?
Well, I know the CEO of Disney. CEO of Disney probably does. He's making about it.
Yeah, one of these people. They live off grid. Every single one of these senior executives of these big corporations, none of them live in urban or suburban areas. None of them. They all live way out in the middle of the countryside, in the middle of nowhere, in off-grid households. They all grow their own vegetables. They all have chickens. They all have livestock. Many of them have things like goats and cows for milk. Okay? And that's how they live. And they all live in compounds with at least 6-foot-high fences with big wrought iron gates on big pillars. This is how they live, Oh, and armed security patrols, They preach gun control to everybody else from dawn till dusk, but they all have their own armed security guards. They're a bunch of hypocrites. They really are.
Okay, well, let's drive that point home. How many acres of land does Ted Turner own in the U.S.? He founded CNN. Okay, he's the second largest individual landowner in North America with approximately, you ready for this number? Begins with the number 2. 2 million acres. Approximately 2 million acres of personal and ranch land in 10 states and in Argentina. Total, 19 ranches. 19 ranches, 16 in the western United States, 3 in Argentina. We'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us, and if you'd like to find her on the internet, just go to usapreparedness.com. There are a couple of links on the instructors tab that'll take you right to Guineith Isaacs, and she is in Australia. She lives off-grid, and she mentioned how the CEOs have large properties and they're off-grid. Well, let's just put an exclamation point on that. So President George W. Bush owns a ranch in Texas. And how big is it? Well, it's 1,583 acres. 1,583 acres in Texas. But that's nothing. Nothing compared to his other property in Paraguay. 300,000 acres.
Crikey.
George Bush. So does he know something that we don't know? Obviously. So he's got a place to go when things get worse. And so do others.
It's difficult to find him there if anyone wanted to find him, especially if he left his cell phone at the office.
That's exactly right. Right. So George Bush has got, and you know, this is that bumbling guy that couldn't formulate sentences very well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you wonder why these guys fight so hard to be president, heck, you know, yeah.
It's absolutely amazing. One of the things that I did a little while ago was I realized that I needed to learn how these, billionaires and elites lived, and maybe I need, that morally most of them are completely corrupt. I'm not talking about their morals. I'm not talking about their personal lives. I'm talking about how they structure their lives. Okay, how they live, how they generate their electricity, water supplies, how they educate their children, where they get their food. Okay, and I began to study this, and I very, very quickly realized that they don't live like regular people. You know something? I'll give you an example. Miriam Rothschild is the sister of Lord Rothschild. Okay. There's a documentary out there, you can probably find it on YouTube, where she gives about a 1-hour interview about how she was raised and how they live in the Rothschild household. And one thing she said was, we grew up on a vast country estate, okay, that means off-grid, because no one's going to bring an electrical line to your door. If you live on a vast country estate, you do live off-grid. And she said, when it came time for our parents to educate us, they taught us how to read, write, and do sums, and they let us loose on the library. And she said, and the interviewer said, so you never went to school? And she said, no, of course not. And she said, we never went to school. Now, Miriam Rothschild is a world-famous entomologist, okay? That means she studies insects, and the type of insects that she studies are called Metocephalides. It means she studies fleas, and she has spent her entire life and career studying fleas. She doesn't need to do anything for a living. She can do what she wants. She studies fleas.
However, that sounds useful. Fleas would be a great vector to spread disease, right?
Oh yeah. If you belonged to one of the world's most powerful families, and you wanted to have a way to conveniently wipe out your enemies, I'm not going to blame Miriam Rothschild for anything. I'm just saying fleas happen to be. You can also solve a lot of problems that way. I don't know what her motivations are.
Yes.
Okay. She may want to wipe out the flea population of the world.
How about this?
And that would be a useful thing.
Yes.
That's what she spent her lifetime studying.
How about how about The Richest Man in Babylon? You recommend that book?
Absolutely.
Yeah. The Richest Man in Babylon. I bought mine for around a little over $11.
Yeah.
Guineith, thank you so much.